KTM, I want to start there, if I may, before we dive into the nitty-gritty. We haven't spoken much about them, really. They've had a couple of highs right at the start of the year with the win with Miguel Oliveira and a podium. Binder performing well too. Oliveira is out of contract, isn't he, at the end of this season, I believe. And Tech 3 still, Keith, in a bit of no man's land as well. They're two rookies not improving on what Petrucci and Lecuona were able to achieve last year. So, I mean, KTM just seem like they're in a little bit of no man's land at the moment.
Yeah, great expectations is where we were. It looked like KTM have really got some momentum going, but it just fell flat on its face this year. To do the Guy Coulon Hervé Poncharal team, Tech 3, or Tech 3, as some would prefer. Two rookies in a team like that as a satellite factory team, that could have gone one of both ways and one of two ways, and it has gone the wrong way, hasn't it? It just hasn't quite worked out. Injury in there. KTM not working great as a factory team as it is at the moment anyway, not performing as the way it should do. The early Grand Prix are always strange. Sometimes you get odd results at those early Grand Prix, and we have. I think now it's difficult, isn't it, with KTM? With that momentum, you might have thought they would have been able to pull something out of the bag come 2022, but it hasn't happened for them. And it's not down to luck anymore. I mean, the step that everyone's made is quite minute compared with the steps that have been made in recent decades. But the fact is, I think the factories and this rule book as it is at the moment, they're getting the maximum amount of what they've got on track. And KTM are just those few tenths off. And that makes a lot of difference nowadays. So, what they're going to do about it. One thing I will say about KTM, they are ruthless. When you've seen them, the way they deal with their riders and they deal with their internal team, don't expect them to sit back. They will have a plan. They will ruthlessly carry it out. But it's almost a situation, Pete, where you'd want no podium points, so you get some concessions back at some stage. It's almost like you sort of tell your riders not to score anything for a while.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they those early rounds, as you say, Keith, it started off great, didn't it? We weren't sure going into this year. There were a few question marks because they sort of cancelled the planned project for this year's new bike, didn't they? It didn't go in the direction they wanted, and they decided, look, let's just really explore what we've got and try and iron out this inconsistency for this year. And it all looked great at these opening rounds, as you're saying, Keith. But you can't draw too much into it. And then we've come into this, the things have settled down. And unfortunately for KTM, they've settled down not very well. Really, Brad Binder's the only guy really carrying them at the moment, isn't he? And the other guys are really struggling.
And look at Honda. I mean, Honda have got that sort of chucked all the new bits at the bike, and it isn't working for Marc Marquez either. Whether Marc Marquez is the same Marc Marquez that he was previously is debatable as well. But the fact is that Honda haven't managed to make it work. Yamaha are almost with doing nothing. They're still in the ballpark. And we keep talking about Yamaha, haven't improved anything, but they're still there or thereabouts, aren't they? With a motorbike that hasn't had anything really done to it. So it's Ducati now. I think Ducati's momentum now is beginning to move. And then the Suzuki thing. I mean, what do we say about that still? I mean, all Suzuki have managed to do is blow the rider market apart. It's just, it's tanked, as I said it would. As soon as you've got a world champion and a pretty good second rider available, it's funny. Rider markets are quite volatile, and everyone's, bumping the price up. Their management are behind them, bumping the price up. But I tell you what, probably they'd all do it for nothing if that was the case. And I think we're fast getting to the point where we're all at a 50% sale at the moment. It's all going to be a massive discount because of what Suzuki had done. And look at, you can talk about Aleix Espargaro. Aleix Espargaro, not that he is never spitting tax, because he always is. He's always got something to whinge about, Aleix, but quite justifiably at the minute. The fact that he's not really been offered what I would consider a sensible deal for being retained at Aprilia. I mean, Aprilia have taken the opportunity really to trim his offer, despite the fact he's had more podiums than any other rider on the grid, which is amazing.
It is amazing, and it's going to blow the rider market apart, isn't it? Just sorry, Pete. Just before we move on properly to the rider market, there's a question that's come in from John Andrew Wheeler. And it's on, you mentioned about Brad Binder and also the fact KTM can be quite ruthless. John has asked, how crucial is Brad Binder for KTM? You have to think, if he gets the right bike under him, he can be in for a win just about every weekend. It was crazy finishing 8th in Mandalika with a stuck ride height device and an 8th last weekend with only one wing. It astounds me.
Wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, Brad he's carrying that project at the moment, isn't he? I mean, this is, there's a lot of talented guys in the KTM project. Miguel Oliveira, as we know, multi-time race winner, but it's not clicking into place for him again. And we thought it would be at the start of this year. He got that win. Okay, it was in the wet, but it was all looking good. We're of course coming back to Mugello, where he got in dry conditions second place last year, but it seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? The KTM that there's not one obvious thing wrong with it. This is the difficulty now, as Keith's been explaining. The bikes are all so close. There's not just, oh, well, that's the bit that needs fixing. They need a little bit from sort of a lot of areas. And it's so hard to make that step when you have all these bikes are good now. There's no bad bikes on the MotoGP grid, and it's trying to find these tiny differences. Remy Gardner, he's been speaking about the Tech Trois team. He was being quite open that he thinks they need some new parts, that they've done everything they can with what they've got. And they're not able to sort of make the step that they need to make the bike more competitive. He's been having problems with the back coming up under braking. They can fix that, but then it won't turn as well, etc., etc., etc. So, yeah, difficult times. I mean, at Le Mans, I think they expected that to be quite a good weekend for them because the bike has traditionally been good at braking. Instead, it was a really quite difficult weekend. I mean, it was summed up. Remy was asked what about the weather conditions for the race because it was looking a bit iffy, and he said, "Well, the best ones for them would be a tornado to come and rip the track up." I mean, and that pretty much summed up what they were expecting from the weekend. So, yeah, difficult times, and yeah, I mean, it seems like they are waiting now for some new parts to come in. But it's the trick is not new parts, as Keith says. You can throw new parts at a bike. It has to address what the issue is, and that's the difficult part, especially when you've got concessions. Testing's limited. You can't send your Grand Prix riders out to go and do private tests anymore. It's harder. It's and they're in a difficult situation. But Brad Binder, to come back to the question, is undoubtedly the guy. He's a bit like their Marc Marquez. He's a bit like their Fabio Quartararo at Yamaha, isn't he? He's the guy that somehow gets a result, pulls it out the hat, even when they're having a difficult weekend.
Probably have as well. It compounds that riders and team members, they drop the head. At some stage, they're demanding all these bits and pieces, and the bits and pieces come and they're perhaps not working the way they thought they would work. And suddenly that starts to rot from the inside outwards. And riders really, really do, start believing that they've not got the bike that will do the business. And that's where the likes of Binder is a figurehead in that team because he's a South African. There's something about the South African nature as well, isn't it? They're gritty. They get on and shape the thing into submission. There are certain riders, certain types of riders that are out there, whereas there are others who'd whinge a bit about it and sort of, feel a bit sort of that they're not getting the treatment that they should be getting, slightly diva-ish, if you like. But so Binder really is a figurehead at the moment in KTM. He should be the man that they focus on to try and get that whole team pulled up behind him. But like you said, big deal not testing. The problem is when you're in this hole that they're in at the moment, you've almost got to slip a bit further into the hole so that you regain concessions for a following year so you can start picking up momentum on development again. So it's kind of not where you want to be. It's almost like instruct the riders not to perform so you get your concessions back later on. It's an odd situation.
It certainly is, isn't it? Well...